Good, man. How you doing?
I'm great. I'm great. I like your setup.
Thank you.
Well,
Got lucky. I bought this house a couple years ago, and it already had the wood paneled office. I was like, cool, perfect for YouTube. Except it's
wow.
wood, so it bounces. The audio's terrible, but
Really? No, it sounds
looks good.
perfect, man. It looks
Yeah,
great.
I had to find this like perfect mic, which cuts about 80% of it out, but it's good.
Nice. Nice. Well, cool. David, we'll just get kind of rolling into it. I usually kind of just jump in on the fly.
Yeah,
So
man.
we're already recording, so we'll just jump in. And
Sure.
if you want to just do a quick little intro, just shout out to everybody here watching on Chris the Insurance Guy channel, YouTube channel. We got David Duford here with us, and really excited to kind of pick your brain, get to know you a little bit more. And yeah, man, go for it if you want to run with it and do a little intro about yourself.
Yeah, hey, Dave Duford here at Duford Insurance Group. Special shout out to Chris, the Insurance Guy's audience. Thank you guys so much for being here. A little bit about myself. I run the channel, David Duford. I've been in the insurance business since 2011. I've run an insurance agency since 2013. My main method of business is final expense, although we're in the senior market as well. What makes, I guess, what we do a little different is we're heavily intensive on the training side and maybe a little unique in how we recruit is that basically everything that I do in the recruiting side of the business is originated from YouTube. That's where I find my agents. That's how they find out about me and convince them to join. So good to be here, Chris. Thank you.
Nice. That's awesome. David, how many years have you been in business, or how long have you been doing this?
Yeah, man. I got into insurance sales out of desperation in 2011. I had a personal training gym that was going down the tubes because of the Great Recession.
Wow.
And I had to find something else to do, stumbled across final expense. So I was like, hey, it's hard work. It's seeing the people. It's entrepreneurial. I like it, right?
Yeah.
So that started then, eventually transitioned to after some ups and downs for sure in my beginning to agency building about 2013, 2014, and gradually over time have done more and more of that.
So, David, when you were first getting going, were you actively selling like a bunch of policies, or because you said you transitioned into the team building?
Yeah, I didn't want to have any agents whatsoever. I mean, like it was like an anathema, right? You know, babysitting people. And I don't want that. So
Yeah.
it was just me selling. I went out there, I talked to seniors who wanted to take care and have peace of mind for their final expenses. And I did that for probably 2.5 years before I took even my first agent on. So I definitely have my beginnings in sales,
Nice.
not recruiting.
Do you think that kind of helped you in the team building aspect of it as well?
Yeah, I don't know how, other business models work, but I can tell you in the life insurance space, there's a big MLM cult Kool-Aid drinking type of mentality that is very much akin to Amway or Herbalife or Mary Kay. I mean, it's all about recruiting people to recruit people to recruit people. And the problem with that is it's a race to the bottom. Good people who need training to develop their skill set don't get it because the guy that brought them on doesn't know anything. They've never actually sold a policy. That happens so often. And
Yeah.
so my firsthand experience was huge for that. Eventually, again, to training agents, because I also failed out of the business, which you think, well, why would I want to learn from a failure? Well, I didn't fail. I came back. But I also know kind of what things not to do, right, from that failure experience, in addition to what to do to be successful, because I've seen both
Sure.
sides of the coin. But yeah, man, that's been my, clarion call since the beginning is training is everything. And many insurance business models just simply don't provide it.
Yeah, man, that's honestly a huge breath of fresh air here to hear, because I see so much of the kind of it almost gives me like a sleazy vibe that just team building, hiring, recruiting, and
Yeah.
like you said, hiring to hire to whatever,
Yeah.
um I think it gives almost a bad reputation to the industry when you see people
It
doing
does.
that, because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, knowledge and the training and the experience to model after somebody who's actually been there, done it, is what empowers people to go out and do the sales themselves. And that's awesome to hear, man, that you actually kind of went through it and you're not just in the recruiting game only. Obviously, it is part now, it's how you're building your business, but
Well, it's not we act kind of like it's rocket surgery here. I mean, like
yeah.
we want to learn from people who know what they're doing. like, duh. But for some reason, the life insurance business is so enamored with this, like this MLM mentality that
Right.
it loses its like real core function, which is to develop a skill set amongst its recruits so that they can go help people consistently. Training and recruiting and building an agency is fine with me. I never was opposed to it. I do it for a living now,
Sure. We all
but
do.
it's all in how you do it. I think, this business is like more of a marathon, right, than a sprint,
Yeah,
and I think we got to look at it a little bit more like that. And I think the outcomes for agents coming in this business from a success standpoint would be much better if that was the case.
for sure. For sure. So what does your kind of training process or program look like? Like, are you doing that? Is it like every single day, just training or hiring or what's your day-to-day looking like?
Yeah, so we made a decision brand wise about fourth quarter 2022 to go all in on sales training. Our
Nice.
business in
Nice.
the life insurance space, especially final expenses, gotten more competitive, but the
Mhm.
whole entirety of the business model is remote and virtual. Now, you may sell remote, you still may sell in person to a client, but when I say remote, there's not a office to report to. It's hard to get one-on-one training or even in-person training. And I think there's a lot that's lost because there's not that high level of training that's going on a consistent basis. And so what we started doing end of last year, getting into this year too,
Mhm.
is really go all in with the mentorship type of model. So we have right now 4 experienced final expense agents who are now mentors on telesales and face-to-face, that when an agent joins Duford Insurance Group, we select them, we interview them. Not everybody gets selected. We
Mm.
get them into a rigorous 10-day onboarding process to learn the entirety of how to sell, what products to select, how to overcome objections, basic stuff, right? But we
Sure.
really put a lot of pressure in a good way to help them maximize what potential they have. Then we let them loose after they're prepared, working leads and seeing the people, and then follow up with them daily at that point to review their sales calls, offer advice on how to improve. And we're admittedly right now in the beginning of this, but we're seeing a complete difference, I think, in the outcomes from these agents, because now they got somebody behind them that's calling them, that's talking to them. It's not like yelling, if you do this, you're fired kind of stuff. It's encouraging mentorship that
Sure.
people want and need. So, yeah, I mean,
Sure.
that's how it looks for us. It's a total difference than what you normally find, which is just watch a couple of videos and definitely don't call me when you need help. That's kind of what you normally find with most agencies.
So you guys are taking calls from them, like your actual agents, helping them along like day-to-day questions as
Oh
well,
yeah.
or
Yeah,
cool.
and final expense especially, it's an underwritten product. It's granted it's simplified
Yeah.
issue, but I've got a lady that's 5 foot 500 pounds, has 100 units of insulin, takes inhalers to treat COPD. Like that's the kind of stuff we run into every day in final expense. It's like, what do you do? Well, our
Right.
guys are experienced. They'll kind of
What
help pinpoint which directions
what
to
do
go.
you do in that situation, David? Honestly, like I don't write final expense. I
Yeah.
don't honestly even know that answer.
Yeah. That one probably would work with Aetna's CVS Health product for first day
Ah,
full coverage, believe it or not. But there are what we call guaranteed acceptance coverage
right,
policies where
right.
no health questions are asked, like Colonial Penn commercials you've probably seen. And
Mhm.
worst case scenario, that's like the trump card. We grab that when nothing else works. So that would be an option too as well for that client.
Okay, gotcha. So there are carriers that are kind of last resort, like you can make it work somehow.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got the options, yeah, and we teach agents to think like brokers in the sense of having multiple carriers so that
Sure.
in these weird circumstances with strange health issues that you've got options and so you can still close the deal, because if you don't, it's hard. It's not impossible to do business, but it's a lot harder to see somebody who wants to buy but can't just because you don't have the options, right?
Is it pretty rare you guys are turning people away? Like, are you pretty
Very
much
rare.
placing? Okay, you're placing
I mean, they
everybody.
got to be like 90 years old,
Yeah.
like 9 toes in the grave, 90 years old, like my great great grandma or something. Or they've got to
Gotcha.
be like really young and really, really bad shape. But if they're between
Okay.
40 and 90, there's usually an option.
Okay, gotcha. And so what kind of led you and building a team in the final expense? Because I've seen other people also taking that route.
Yeah,
What made you choose the final expense versus like term or whole life? And because
sure.
there's a lot of premium in all those as well.
For sure, yeah. There's so much business. There's so much opportunity in this business. That's what's crazy about it.
Yeah.
I think out of convenience, right? My background was in final expense, and
Hmm.
I'm like a lot of people. You have imposter syndrome when you're starting something. It's like, well, I don't want to
Sure.
like pretend like I know what I'm talking about. And I don't really know much beyond final expense. I know a little bit about term to be dangerous, but I teach what I know. And that's kind of was the driving factor. Now, I think the nice thing about final expense that's good is that there's tons of prospects. It's generally easy to get leads. It's a simple product to teach. So therefore it's easier to scale, right? As an agency owner, it's not like a highly
Sure.
technical product that not everybody's going to easily grasp. And it really comes down to hard work. If you will just make the calls and spend the time necessary on the phone or in person with the prospects, unless you're just a complete moron, you're gonna make some sales. The business opportunity is there if you have the discipline with it.
Yeah. So you're saying like mentioning there like the discipline. What kind of gets you going with that? What motivates you to get you, through these kind of barriers and building up the business? Because obviously there's, I built my agency here, and there's definitely levels to it. What kind of
Yeah.
keeps you going, and what pushes you to be disciplined and motivated on a day to day?
Well, I'm privileged in the sense that I come from a unique background. My mom and dad divorced when I was 3. My
Okay.
mom's a working class nurse, right? So that's what I grew up with. That's kind of my background. But my dad is very successful. He sold his chemical business to Ecolab at 47 or 48. Stock price went
Mm,
up a couple of dollars at Ecolab. So, retired a multimillionaire. So I have this weird, like, both feet in both worlds of, very wealthy and just, normal, working class type, right?
sure.
And so,
Oh
and I have men in my life that have been successful. My uncles in part started XM Radio, was one of the
wow.
head programmers. Yeah. And then my grandpa Logan was a industrial HVAC guy back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Didn't like kill it like my dad did, but did
Sure.
pretty good. Had a pretty comfortable retirement.
Hey
I say
man.
all this because I've had influences positively in my life to be successful, to do well. And I've always had this weird sense. It's kind of strange saying it, but it's my destiny to be successful. Now, it definitely didn't look like that for the first 10 years of my career. I mean, I had a
Sure.
personal training gym that I did okay as a young man, but I wasn't like making 6 figures at all. And then in final expense, it took me a couple of years before I was up to that level. So I basically spent my 20s like trying to reconcile this whole, like, you're destined for success with them. You're actually not. If you look at it, you're either normal or floundering. If you look at all the debt you've accumulated, just trying to get there. So I don't know, but I love to work. It's kind of my passion. I love being creative. Business is just my outlet for it.
Hmm.
It's not about the money for me anymore. It's just a way. It's something I'm good at, and I enjoy
Sure.
it, and I can help people, and it provides a sense of purpose in my life. And I think waking up to that, I'm grateful every day for what I've got, and I just love doing more and more of it because it's just innately who I am.
That's awesome, man. I appreciate you sharing that too with like some of the background of your family members.
Yeah,
A lot of the people watching my channel are usually people just kind of starting up their own agencies. A lot of them are younger people too.
sure.
So you mentioned kind of you earlier on didn't have as much success as you are maybe having now. What do you think, comparing and looking at all the different perspectives and history of your family members that have had all these, levels of success? What do you think is like that factor that, because you say it's destiny that to have success, but there must be something that is like a common factor between everybody that you recognize, or you kind of have seen. What is there anything you can pinpoint that you think is like a X factor maybe?
I just never quit. Like
Okay.
I'm higher than above average intelligence, but I'm not some genius. And I say that because if you start going to like convention meetings and you start talking to agency owners and other people, like they're average intelligence, generally speaking. So it's not a factor of intelligence. What I've recognized, it's a factor of focus and
Hmm.
execution over the long haul. That's where most people like fail at, is and it's especially tempting in this business because there's so much opportunity. And if you start struggling with, say, final expense, but you see mortgage protection or Medicare, you just shift gears. You don't like embrace the suck. Like, you'll never really get ahead because you never really grow. And so a lot of people
Right.
bounce around from thing to thing. And I had that ish in me in the beginning, but luckily I kind of matured a little bit. So I think it's just executing on the fundamentals. That's what I see with everybody, no matter what business they're selling, where their background is, right? It's
Sure.
that they have a vision, they can see it in their mind's eye, and they're totally dedicated and focused to it. And you'll see people across different industries that basically say the same thing. And it
Yeah,
sounds easy, and
totally.
we all say it makes sense, but it's really hard to execute that consistently. And that's where, if you do this as an agency owner, whatever you're doing, if you
Mhm.
stay time on task, there's nobody left standing because everybody else quits eventually, is what normally happens. And you've developed all this knowledge and experience from the ups and the downs that, lo and behold, you're a success overnight. It just took 10 years to get there. That's how it
For
was for
sure.
me.
For sure. Yeah, I think it's a super common thing, like you said, across the board, the dedication, the focus, the execution, and it's super easy when things start to get kind of tough just to kind of run away from them. Have there
So,
ever
so a
Yeah,
couple,
go for it.
I have to add this because
Sure.
I think it's worth repeating. I gave up my 20s. Now I'm 38 now, sold, to have success starting in my early 30s. Really is where it is. And my point is there's this whole work-life balance thing. My opinion here, there's no such thing.
Yeah.
You got to pay a price to be successful. I'm not saying it's the right price. You got to determine that for yourself. But I
What did
mean,
that look like for you, David? Like what were you
oh
doing?
yeah. My wife had twins, and I went back to work the next weekend. I didn't do a honeymoon because I went back to work.
How old were
I
you?
My honeymoon was probably 24, 23.
Oh
My
wow.
twins, my girls who are 9 now, so I must have been 29 then,
Okay.
right?
Gotcha.
I didn't go on a vacation for like 7 years, right? I didn't get home till 10 or 11 o'clock many nights as I was out there selling and building the agency. And it was a toll for on some level for our marriage. And again, I don't, this whole idea like, oh, you'll work 80 hours a week and everything will be fine. No, it's not. There's a price to pay.
Yeah.
And my only point in saying this is I'm not trying to humble brag or anything here, but like, that's the reality. Like, there's a sacrifice that you have to make if you want to have success in your life. And anybody who suggests otherwise is full of crap. And you got to decide to pay it in advance. And there will be plenty of times where you think that the price was too much to pay. Should you go on? But you got to keep going.
For sure.
At some level, it's a function of time, I believe. If you just apply yourself, keep your head down, and understand now, like now I work at home, I can go out this door and I see my kids every day. I go on dates with my wife. We have no financial problems, like it's a beautiful thing, but it definitely costs a lot in the beginning. So I say that to the aspiring folks out there who want
For
something in
sure.
life.
For sure.
I just think that has to be said because it's required, just what
No,
it is.
I appreciate it, and it's always nice to hear you. I'm 26 years old, so for me, also, I'm in the thick of it right now. Like I'm spending the early mornings to the late nights, and luckily, I mean, maybe not luckily, but I don't have a wife at the moment, don't have kids, so I'm just kind of right now. I have a lot of extra free time, and I'm just running with that. If
Yeah, you're a
what,
young man. This is what you should be doing.
yeah.
All young men should be using their youth to apply themselves to something great.
Dude,
You
I don't
got
know
the
what else
rest of
I'd
your
be doing.
life.
I don't know what else I'd be
Yeah.
doing with my time right now. I just like that's like I have free time on even on the weekends. I'm
Yeah.
like I could go out and party with people and like go out to a bar and do whatever. But I'm like, dude, I have
Yeah.
I'm on a mission, and I
Good.
think it's gotten to the point where borderline like obsessed. I'm like I need to just this needs to happen.
Yeah.
Um
Well, keep your
so
head down, man. That's all right. That then one day before you know it, all your friends are taking notice. You live in the nice house, you have the nice life,
we'll see.
and it's because of everything that you laid down early in life, and they never understood it or got it. That's how it was with me, and
Yeah.
now they
Did
do. Even
did something
my wife didn't support me for years until maybe 5 or 6 years in. No joke. So this is the way it
what
is.
was that kind of resistance? Like she was just kind of wasn't sure because you were just spending so much time and stuff, or like she couldn't see the full big picture, maybe, or
Well, I mean, look, my wife loves me and didn't want, she wanted me around, and I
sure.
wasn't making a lot of money. And we were living next to neighbors that, we live in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So there's
Oh, nice.
Tennessee Valley Authority is here. And it's basically a big federal operation for energy.
Okay.
And if you get a job there, like you're set for life. Our neighbors had 6 weeks of vacation, 6-figure income. That's the
Nice.
standard I was compared to. Right. So she
Right.
wanted me to do that, but like, I knew myself well enough that I'm not an employee. Like, I'm an entrepreneur. It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
And it took a battle with that. And thank God she's patient, right? Cause a lot of them aren't, and
Sure.
finally turned a corner, and she's very thankful now, of course, for that. But yeah, it's just the reality of it. And,
Yeah,
you know,
man. I hear you. I hear you. Was there a moment where you noticed like that is the turning kind of the corner a little bit where you were like, oh shoot, now it's
we
starting
did
to
a
really
we did a really good. I'll do a shameless plug for my channel, and my channel is a really good interview with me and my wife. We only did one together, and
nice.
she said in that interview, we kind of talked about this at length. She said the change happened probably about 5 years in, where we moved into a nice house, a lot bigger, and we went on a vacation for a month. Right, it was like our first vacation as a
Wow.
family ever, and like we were gone a month, and I
Good
think
amount
that's
of
kind
time.
of what finally sold it on her. Sold it to her. But it didn't happen overnight. It took 5-6 years. So
Yeah, 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 totally. That's the interesting part about what I've seen about the progression of any building of a business, at least what I've observed. And the first year completely sucked for me. The
yeah,
second year, we broke, like, lost a little money year one, started to break even year two, profitable year three. And now we're just in year four. Now we're kind of finally starting to see kind of a little more of the, benefits of the hard work. But the interesting part about it is that it seems like the feeling of it, it's never felt like there was like one day I woke up, I was like, oh shoot, now it's all like,
right.
it's almost because you deal with every little step up to that level. And I feel like
Right.
it's just going to continue this way. That's why I was curious to see like if there was a moment where you kind of like saw like, oh shoot, now we're in a good, really, really good spot. But was it also similar? Like it just progressively
Well,
just
yeah,
built
there's
or
so here, I'll tell you what I experienced. Maybe this is coming down the pike for you. And I
sure.
see this time and again. If you look at the like a 10-year trajectory of
Yeah.
my income in insurance is like this,
Hmm.
goes up a little bit. Then the
Hmm.
last 3 years, like this. Like
Nice.
it's the hockey stick analogy. I've heard
Yep.
this a
I've heard that as
ton.
well.
It's true. Like,
Yeah.
I've literally done the same thing from building an agency, putting content out there, doing
That's
my pitch
crazy. That's so
since
crazy.
2013. I still do the same thing. Granted, it's modified to some
Sure.
extent, but the fundamentals are the same. But
Sure.
my income's gone up like probably 7 to 10 times what it was when I first started. Right. So
Mm.
my point, but it didn't really pick up till the last 3 years. Right. So it's
Wow.
weird. It's very strange, but
What is
this is
that
not the
exactly? Like,
norm.
how does that happen?
I don't know, but it's how most entrepreneurs work. It's like you don't, I never expected it. Then all of a
Yeah.
sudden it just happened. And it wasn't anything I was doing differently except executing on the fundamentals. It just took several years to follow through on. I don't know.
I've heard that. Someone talks about it. His name's Alex Hermosi. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Alex
Oh yeah,
Hermosi.
for sure.
Yeah, cool guy. He's the first person I ever heard talk about that hockey stick. And I think it's because of he mentions also like skill stacking. Um,
Sure.
like the
Right.
amount of stuff that I'm able to do now, like today versus what I was doing 4 years ago when I was first starting the agency. I'm now able to like train people. I know how to hire, I know how to do sales, I know how to do marketing, everything, lead generation, everything is pretty much dialed in. So like it's just this compounding effect. And I have a
Yeah.
feeling that's a big part of why that really kind of like it's a exponential kind of growth. Um,
Yeah.
but right,
Brian
yeah,
Tracy, sales guy, right? He would
yeah,
talk about how, the where you are today versus where you want to be. Typically, it's one skill set, maybe two, usually
yeah,
just one skill set that you've got to develop. It's not like 50 million different things. Maybe it is in the beginning, but after you have some experience under your belt, like,
yeah.
typically there's a bottleneck on one thing. And if
Was
you
there one
fix
for
that,
you that you felt like was like really, really important? I mean,
oh yeah, I mean,
yeah,
so I think my business's bottleneck, as it is with most agencies, is once you have a program, a niche set up, training
yeah,
protocol in place, it's the funnel is the bottleneck.
yeah.
You have to, how are you going to bring in more candidates to your opportunity, right? And that's my bottleneck, right? Like,
Right.
everything about my business works, it's very scalable, but
It-
we do a lot of recruiting, but I could
right.
do 5 times as much, right? And that's
Okay.
my issue is, I'm an organic guy, right? So I do all my recruiting organically, but there's a limit to that to a certain extent. that
Right.
I've run up against. So, we've gotten into paid recruiting to a certain extent because that if we can max that out, man, that's where the money's at.
So you find the candidate, but then you're saying the bottleneck is the actual, like, you got them in the door and then getting them up to speed so that they're knowledgeable to sell the products.
And that's not even the bottleneck's finding people who
Oh,
will do
gotcha.
what we
Just
teach.
people.
It's
Gotcha.
just finding people. Yeah, I mean, it's our opportunity is fantastic for the right candidates, right? And while we've
Makes
got a
sense.
good flow of candidates, my point is, I bet we're at 20% capacity of the new recruits we could take in, right? So my income and business production is 20% what it could be, and all because I'm only recruiting, 70 to 100 people a month instead of 500 to 600.
Wait, so why wouldn't you go for like the 500?
Oh yeah, no, I'm definitely am. But it's required, like you were talking about, a new skill set, right?
Oh,
So
gotcha.
my mind is all organic, right?
Sure.
YouTube. And now
Sure.
I've got to start
Sure.
switching gears to paid ads, to Facebook ads predominantly, possibly some TikTok, right?
You're not on the TikTok?
No, not yet. Well, marginally,
Okay.
marginally.
Okay. Dude,
We're working on it.
you could take every one of your videos,
I know.
have a video editor. This is what we do.
Right.
Just for everybody that watching. We get a video editor and virtual assistant that they just chop up clips and have them find the best clips of every single video,
Yep.
and then boom, just be posting them on TikTok. I mean, dude, that's an easy organic reach route that I think definitely you should implement if you're not doing that.
I'll tell you, and I'll speak to this because you're bringing that up, because you're 100% right. If you
Yeah.
guys are interested in the content game, it's the best place to be when it comes to organic or comes to recruiting or finding prospects too.
Yeah.
But you don't have to make hours and hours of original content every week, daily. You can
Uh-huh.
make like what we do now is exactly what you're doing. Like, we'll take an hour-long seminar or a Zoom meeting we did, and then we'll just
Nice.
cut that up into shorter clips,
Mm,
right? Like we did 6 shorts this weekend on my YouTube channel, just repurposed from interview videos, and I think we got like 2 or 3,000 more views than we normally do by just original content, right? So
yeah,
yeah,
totally.
you're 100% right.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, it's great because they can cross pollinate into like YouTube Shorts and then
Yep.
Instagram Reels, and it just goes it's
Right.
all over the place. I
Right.
think yeah, it's funny. I actually got a phone call yesterday. Some guy wanted to come work for my office. Because he was following me, watching my videos on YouTube.
Oh,
So
cool.
yeah, it's definitely it works. You're right, 100%.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so I know you mentioned also, David, about the fundamentals. What are like the fundamentals for you? Like, what do those look like exactly?
As an agent or an agency, they're actually kind of similar.
Well,
I can
yeah,
speak to
that's a
both.
good point. Good point. Yeah, let's talk about both, honestly,
Yeah.
because those are probably both really important now.
So agent first. So the fundamentals for agents is
Yeah.
you got to have somebody to talk to, right?
Hmm.
That's 40% of it.
Right.
You've got to have some sort of niche market. I
Right.
believe in focused, not a general type of approach. So like a final expense agent versus a life insurance agent. A final expense agent is better because you're more focused on that product specialty. And you've got to have so activity, a niche, and a system to get the activity, right? So leads, whether that's prospecting cold, purchasing leads, you've got to have that plus the niche plus the time on task to make it happen. Again, if you are lacking in one of those areas, you're going to have a lot of difficulty in the business.
For sure.
Now, for agency building, it's almost the same. You have to have a funnel, an
Yep.
intake of interested candidates, whether that's paid, organic, or otherwise. You
Right.
have to have some sales pitch. And I say that loosely, an opportunity, right? Where you can clarify what it is that you do, differentiate it, and how it's going to help the person as
Sure.
opposed to getting a job from somewhere else. You have to have a system, a blueprint to train these people to get them sales ready. And then you've got to have a system that they can duplicate onto themselves. So I guess kind of an extension of that on the marketing side too, as well. So
Gotcha. Uh-huh.
yeah, it's pretty much the same. You got to find your prospects, you got to teach them on the system, and then let them out there and get it done. And then service them for sure. That's
Of course.
probably the other side of that that's important. You can't just hire agents and not help them. You have
Sure.
to help them actively.
Yeah. I think a lot of people probably out there are sitting there wondering, like, okay, how do I go about getting more leads in today's world? what do you think is like the best way to get leads, or what has worked best for you guys?
Well, so it ultimately is market dependent in my experience. So like we do a lot of direct mail for face-to-face final expense agent leads, which is unusual for a lot. They're like direct mail. Yeah. Oh yeah. They work
Yeah.
really well with seniors.
Wow.
Um, but there's a lot of interest in digital leads. Facebook leads work very well. They've gotten a little less effective as they used to be because there's such a huge saturation effect. But
Right. Right.
TikTok has taken off. I think
Yeah.
that's probably the hottest opportunity for lead gen for seniors for 65 and older.
That's
TikTok.
insane. That's
I know,
insane.
but if you're selling ACA health insurance or PNC, like I'd be on TikTok, like,
Yeah,
white on rice, like that's the place to
for
be.
sure. For sure.
Um, we don't do a lot of networking. We don't do a lot of seminars. We don't do a lot of, and not that any of this doesn't work. Again, I teach what I know, and what I know is how to buy leads and work a system based off of purchase leads or marketing.
Right.
So we just don't do a lot of the, sphere of influence or seminar marketing in our space because it's just not necessary when you have a purchase lead system at scale.
Gotcha. So you got your system and you're just kind of doubling down on that. Is that pretty much kind of what you're
Yeah,
doing?
yeah, that's the thing. It's pay to play. It's scalable. That's a huge deal on final expense and Medicare.
Yeah.
We do a lot of Medicare and ACA to a certain extent. You got to have a system that scales, right? You could have a really good, you could have a great system based off of doctor referrals.
Hmm.
But if
Hmm.
you're only in a couple of doctor offices and it takes years to add more because you need to build trust or rapport with them, it's not very scalable, right?
Right.
So that's why we rely more on the paid side. Yeah, it costs money, but you can scale it a lot faster and scale your income with it.
Yeah. And I'm sure that you probably, scaling, it's an interesting thing too here, because like the PNC world has a bit of a different, income and revenue generating um, system. So you guys make your upfront commissions and then drop off pretty hard on the second, third, fourth ongoing years, right? Is that how the
For
final?
life related products, yeah, final expense. Now, Medicare is a residual based product, very similar to PNC.
Okay.
Um, the difference being Medicare supplements, a form of Medicare policy that typically pays 6 years, the same level
Wow.
amount of commission.
Okay.
Medicare Advantage pays the same for life as long as you keep the client. But yes, that's different. And that's good because like PNC, it's a service-based business model and you want to be incentivized to keep people happy and service them. Whereas with life insurance,
Yeah.
the big draw is the higher commissions, but it's very transactional. It's one and done, and agents
How,
don't necessarily care as much of service because there's no incentive to.
how do you navigate that? So I'm sorry, David, do you do the Medicare in that as well? Or is it just
We
the
do,
final?
yeah, yeah. That's
Okay.
not something we recruit to as heavily as in final expense. We actually look at Medicare as something that we pick up in year 2 of the agent's career because we
Gotcha.
are wholly in belief that you should have a residual based income product.
Yeah.
And with final expense being the primary product most agents start with, senior market, like Medicare is the logical cross sell, right? It's
Sure.
seniors.
Sure. Makes
They all have
sense.
Medicare, right?
How do you go about navigating that scale, like the scaling aspect? Because the
Mhm.
commissions are different structures. So the reinvestment aspect, I'm just curious to see how you structured your scaling of that,
Of final expense, Medicare, or both.
or both. Yeah, because you're kind of probably juggling the two different structures
Sure.
of commissions.
Yeah. So we start new agents, not always, most of the time with final expense. And we start them at a set level, part or full time.
Hmm.
Once they start to get traction, the big thing I'll tell them is, hey, look, start taking more leads. Like you're doing really well. And the way
Hmm.
you make more income is more leads. So then
Sure.
and they've developed the confidence from results to take that next leap of faith, going from 1,000 a week in investment to 1,500 or something, right?
Ah,
And so that's how we scale there, because typically with scale, the return on investment, which is the main metric we use to measure success, stays the same, So
okay.
if I may put 1,000 in to get 4,000 in commission, I'm likely going to get 6,000 in from 1,500, right? Same ratio, 4
Makes
to 1.
sense. Makes sense.
For Medicare, it's a little dicier. It's the same
Right.
principle, but because Medicare pays so much less, the ROI is a lot lower. So what most agents do is they get into Medicare not fully in their first year of Medicare, because by January, that's when they're getting paid the big residual check now every single month. So that
Sure.
second year of Medicare is when the scale starts to increase. because that's the issue with Medicare. It doesn't
Ah,
pay the bills very well up front. So we don't really start many people with it. I don't know if PNC is like that, but Medicare definitely is.
well, PNC in a certain way, it's similar. Like personal lines insurance usually pays lower commissions than commercial
Right.
lines insurance.
Okay.
But typically, I from what I've seen is PNC agents will start on the personal side because it's just an easier product and
Right.
it's more accessible. Everybody has auto and home insurance,
Yeah.
so that's just a easier, kind of startup, friends, family,
Yeah.
warm network. And
Sure.
then the commercial, once you kind of understand the products, then you start to dabble into the commercial. So it's a little bit backwards actually. So you go with the
Okay.
small, lower commission, and
Right.
then
Yeah.
scale into almost like bigger commission. And those renewals are pretty consistent as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it just kind of depends, but it's very interesting to see how you guys go about. So you're actually having the agents invest into their own lead generation as well. Is that right?
Correct.
Got it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so we have historically, that's the standard. We've
Mhm.
part of my rebrand has now started what's called our career division. So for select agents, we'll put them on a lower contract commission wise in exchange for us providing them the leads. So it's a
Wow.
great way to get a guy or gal who's really hungry, but doesn't
Yeah.
have the financial capacity to invest in leads, or they're just scared because
Yeah.
they've never done entrepreneurism before. This is a great way to start, build
Yeah.
confidence. And then if they want to, ultimately to go full broker, so they pay their own way for leads at a higher commission.
Gotcha. So that's the highest level. It's like you're pretty much independent, almost like they're their own little business, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's not for everybody, though. Some people do
Yeah.
better in a more structured environment. Granted, their leads are paid for and they're at lower commissions. They're some people just thrive better under a much more structured setup. Some people, like myself, I'm like totally independent. I'm a lone wolf by design. I could never show up to an office and do just fine, but I'm weird. Like most people aren't like that. They need some kind of structure to get motivated, stay motivated, and keep their eyes
Sure.
on the ball.
Sure. Do you have anything in place for like motivation other than just kind of, I know you said you had your four people kind of, working with people
Sure.
on a regular basis. Is there anything else you guys do for like motivation and stuff to keep everybody eyes on the prize?
So part of my shtick as a brand has always been like the anti-MLM. So I
Right.
routinely, as I did earlier, make fun of the Kool-Aid drinkers, right? So I've always been very weary of pushing a kind of motivational type of like, content to because I don't want to be a hypocrite,
Sure.
right? Um,
Yeah.
for me, the way I've looked at motivation is competence creates confidence, right? So if you
Sure.
become competent because you're trained and you take that into the field, you're obviously aware, you're brand new, but you start helping people and they appreciate it. That's going to create confidence. And it's not like a high that wears off after a couple hours. Like it's real. Like, hey, I actually know what I'm doing. I'm getting results, helping people and making good money. To me, that's what's motivating. Um,
100%, dude. I
so yeah,
agree.
that's kind of where our focus is. But you know, uh, look, I get it. I get why the big time MLMs do a lot of motivational stuff because it does work. It's very
Short term,
fleeting.
maybe. Yeah, it's a little
Yeah,
short term. I agree. I think like what you're saying is 100% my belief in my agency too. And I kind of hate a little bit on the MLM, the Kool-Aid drinkers as well. Like I put out a video kind of comparing and just speaking on that a little bit.
sure,
Um, but I do think it's important, obviously, like sprinkle in here like a little motivation once in a while, just kind of get, morale up and whatnot. But
sure,
I 100% the knowledge and the the more the more confidence you have, the more you start to get momentum, and then just seeing shots going in. That's the true long-term sustainable way to
right,
build a successful team. So it's awesome to hear that you're doing that too,
right.
man.
Thank you.
Yeah. um do you have any like set goals kind of for 2023 that you have in mind? Like what do you anything you're shooting for, like taking it to a different level?
Yeah, no, like I said earlier, like the things I, suggest I struggle with too, like focus. There's so much opportunity. And what
Sure.
I've tried to do is really work down what do I want out of my business? Where should I take it to get the most impact and to get the most results? So for me, the big goal is to really develop this whole rebranded approach to getting agents on board, training them and helping them succeed.
Sure.
So, basically it's a lot of internal focus on making sure the systems for training and recruiting the right people are in place to sustain those. A
Hmm.
big thing for me is I was a solopreneur up to last year, October. I've never had a single
Oh,
employee,
wow.
lots of VAs. I never
Sure.
wanted employees, to be honest with you, but I saw the need for what we were doing now, and it was going to
Hmm.
require me to get out of my comfort zone and hire people. And I'm so thankful that I have. It's been a relief in some ways, but I want to build up the people in my organization that are basically the front leaders that are helping these people succeed. So, and
Yeah.
taking more of a leadership role and guiding them, obviously, are people too. And being committed to the best that we can be. We're not the biggest. I have no interest in being the biggest per se. I just want to be the best place where agents can go that have a desire to help people in the senior market, especially with final expense and Medicare, and just staying
That's
focused on
yeah.
that.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I think it sounds like you're really trying to just refine systems, processes, and
Right.
just be an efficient machine. Is that kind of what I'm getting?
Basically,
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah. Yeah. I think efficiency always ends up winning in any, aspect of business, sports. You can look at, even looking at like fights, like fighting, boxing, like the efficient team, the efficient player ends up winning. So I think, yeah, your heads in
Well,
the
as long as you're effective first.
sure.
To
That's true.
me, I think Peter Drucker said this, like, efficiency is great, but it
Sure.
comes after you're effective, right? Like when you're getting results, like with scale, right?
Right.
You know, if you get results on a non-scaled basis, then it's time to get more efficient, I guess you could say, squeeze out the
Hmm.
excess, but not at the sacrifice of the effective, right? So for me,
And so when you
devil's
say
advocate here.
no, no, of course, man. So when you say effective, like, what do you mean? Like actually showing that you can make a sale, or like how? What do you? Can
Yeah.
you
Well,
elaborate a little bit?
I'd give you an example in the agent world, what we look at. Like a lot of people, the big trend now,
Hmm.
and it works fine for the right people, although a lot of people aren't really built for it, to be honest with you, is the telesales remote world. The
Okay.
idea right now with coronavirus changing the way people do work is now it's like, hey, I could sit in my underwear from home and make
Yeah.
all this money selling insurance. It sounds great, and it's really just tempting. The
Sure.
reality of it, and the people will justify it like, oh, I don't have to put miles on my car. I don't have to go out and get no
Right.
showed. I can just pick up the next phone. And that's not that that's wrong. But the
Yeah.
thing is, my observation has been the good agents in telesales versus the good agents in face to face, no one really makes like an outstripped amount of money more than the other. And so
Sure.
this idea that telesales is more efficient or more is not true because it's not as effective. If you look at the results, the close rates are lower, the
Mm,
resistance to buying is lower because you're not there in front of them like you would be face to face.
mm.
So you could argue it's less efficient to sell face to face, but there's a higher effective rate with the close rates, et cetera. So it's just you got to think of both. I don't think you can look at one
Yeah,
versus the
that's a good point. It's a very
sometimes
good point.
effectiveness is sacrificed at the altar of efficiency.
Yeah, like, dude, I have buddies that are in commercial real estate, different sales positions that they work from home and they're making great money. And I have this weird thing where like I have to come to the office every single day,
Yeah.
no matter what. I just feel unproductive sitting at home. I feel almost maybe like my home setup is not the right setup. Some people have
Yeah.
great, looks like you got a great little setup over there, but um for me, like I have to get into the office. Um
Yeah.
and it just, yeah, you're right. Like now that I'm like kind of reflecting on that, the effectiveness of what I'm doing here, I just feel like more is getting done. I'm just,
But it's not efficient. You have to drive in traffic to get to
dude,
your
yeah.
office. So you're effective. It's
Yeah,
like, isn't
it's
that what
true.
matters?
It's true. Yeah, you're super right about that. Yeah, I
I
think
have a telesales agent who works from home, and she was like, she was face to face for years, and she said, I started working at home. Like it's really tough. Like she doesn't even
yeah,
have a husband or kids. She's got like a couple of fur babies, right?
sure.
And Melissa was saying like, I just I'd get up and go do the laundry or go do some dishes and just distract myself from the hardcore work. And for her, her solution was to go one of these co-op office places, right? Where you
Yeah,
go in and she's
sure.
now at work. She has to get dressed. So her mindset's in the form of work. And like her first week she did it, she like doubled her income, so it's so stuff like
Crazy.
that. Not a,
Crazy.
is that efficient? No,
Nope.
but it's very effective. And that's what counts. That's what puts money in your bank.
For sure, for sure. Is there anything you think that you've noticed about yourself that's been like a shift from like, hey, this is just straight effectiveness. Like this is just putting in something that's gonna just generate results like that you've noticed for yourself in your career?
Yeah. So this ultimately, the agency game, when I say agency, like recruiting agents and building a team, it's a
Hmm.
relationship business ultimately.
Sure.
And so if you think about what makes for good relationships, it's interaction, it's taking
Right.
phone calls, it's text, it's everything. And like if you think about it like a marriage, right? It's the same
Right.
principles in place for business too. And again, the problem that I've sorted through and others eventually do is if you rely nowadays on technology to automate things to a obscene or obscure level, you start to take the human interaction relationship away.
Right.
And so if you're taking in an otherwise inherent business model relying on human relationships and you remove that, that's actually going to be a negative thing. So what people want more than anything is relationships these days because there's a lack of authenticity, there's a lack of the human contact that I think we're all evolved to have. And
Hmm.
and I think for any agency owners out there is be very careful relying too much on, too much Zoom calls or too much group calls or videos you force agents to watch or not talking to people. Because what you'll find happens is people feel disconnected and they don't have a relationship. And those are the guys and gals more likely to leave you and go somewhere else where they feel a little more appreciated. So
Yeah.
don't forget the human element, so that's me resorting back to not efficiency because it's sometimes it's
Yeah.
not efficient to run relationships, right? You got to pay attention to people,
Totally.
but it's effective.
But if you look at it, actually, ultimately, like when you do run the maybe analysis on what those relationships can bring out, which it's really hard to put
Yeah.
to put a number or to get
Right.
metrics on that. That's the what makes it hard because then you
Sure.
can still go back and say that is the efficient route, right?
That's
Because
true. Right.
so that back at you're like that could be it. That it's just a matter
Right.
of it's hard to measure, I think. Um,
Right. Yeah. Relationships
so
are we all know that they're important and they produce profitable results, but it's not like an equation where you
right,
can measure it and it works on paper as well as it does in real life. Like
yeah.
it's a funny thing, but we know it works. So you got to do it, but don't expect immediate results.
Right, right, and that's something I tell like, I get a lot like I said, a lot of new agents hitting me up, and they ask me like, "What did you do in those first, 6 to 12 months to get your business off the ground?" Dude, I wasn't using ClickFunnels, I wasn't using Facebook ads.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
doing pure, like, shaking hands, kissing babies. I was handing out, I was writing handwritten cards to people, throwing, like, a Starbucks little gift card saying, "Here's a cup of coffee on me. Send me, anything you got that you don't wanna write yourself," to State
And
Farm agents and stuff like
that
that.
works better now than
Yeah,
it ever has been.
dude, yeah,
Like,
it's true.
like the any way that you can humanize this relation the prospecting process
Yeah,
is going to work better and probably continually so as we get into the AI era and
agreed.
automation and people feel even more disconnected. I don't think it's turning the corner on that. So,
Right,
yeah, it takes time and effort, but it's a differentiating factor. And I can tell you this, your best clients, the ones with the most money, they appreciate human service. That's
100%.
that's what they want and they'll pay for it. So
So then the
great.
question is, like, how do you make that more efficient with not necessarily eliminating not we're not gonna automate anything, but be more efficient as a human and building out a team that is gonna be doing the same thing? That's, I guess, the question.
Find
Do you
good
have
people.
Yeah,
Find good people that have the same values and put them in positions of responsibility, right?
right.
So
People.
it's people. It always comes down to the people, right? That's what we're finding, right? Like the
Yeah.
4 men that I put in place to run the sales training side, like
Mm,
they've got the same backgrounds, they've gone through the ropes as far as their personal experience selling.
mhm.
It's a relation orientation because it's a mentorship program, right? And it's just trusting people who are good at what they do to take over your role. And that's the hardest thing to do in entrepreneurship. It's been for me because I'm pretty good at it. And it's like, well, I got to turn it over to somebody else. What if they're not as good? Well, you got to trust the process, judiciously pick good people to run things and
For sure, for sure.
be all
And
right.
then keep them, nurture them,
Yeah,
keep those. Yeah,
for sure.
it's
Yeah.
that's another aspect of it too, because I've even kind of observed other business owners. they bring in, looks like they build up these great teams, and then they have people leaving them after like 2 years.
Yeah.
And dude, that's like the worst thing that can happen. You really want to make sure, that's one of the big things too, is employee satisfaction, um, retention. Those are kind of big points that I think people don't talk about enough. But I think the point is, like, people is such an important part that that should be another big conversation being had too.
Yeah, and it's funny. Most I was talking to an agent yesterday, and he's a very productive final expense agent. Um, and he and I worked years ago. He went on and moved on to another organization where he's currently at. We were talking, hadn't talked in years, and he was like, "Man," and I think this is where most of the agency owners fall apart is communication. You know,
Right.
like there, and which is the core of any relationship, is an open, door to talk in good times and bad, and to get feedback. Because if you do that, like, so much of the problems that manifest can be prevented. And even if things are hard, people will stick by it because they're like, I can trust this guy. He's not going to screw me. Well, what happened with
Sure.
this guy, the person he went to is changing his contract, changing it around to a disadvantage point, and didn't even talk to him about it. Right. And he wants to leave, and had the agent owner, and I know him, he should know better. But if he had done the basic fundamental stuff, like had a conversation,
Yeah.
explain what's going on, had his back, was visually having his back, verbally having, made it out in the open. This guy was working for him. There was never
Sure.
conversation would never had happened, and would have never worried about losing this really good agent that's paying him great overrides, right?
Sure.
So, if there's a lesson to be learned from that, is just in good times and bad, keep the open door, take care of your people. If things are bad, let them know.
Yeah.
The good people will stick with you because they recognize that is such a rare trait, and it is to be respected.
Yeah, totally. Well, hey, David, I want to be respectful of your time. I know we've been on here for a little while.
Yeah, that's all right.
One thing I usually like to end most of my podcasts here with is either like a good quote, and I see you have a lot of good books back there. Do you have any like good books that you're reading, or do you read, or any good quotes that you have for like pieces of advice for people kind of just getting going, getting started, that you think could be of value, or something that's like a mantra
yeah.
to you?
Ben Feldman, Guinness World Record holder of life sales and volume back in the 60s and 70s. A couple of his books up on the shelf there. Definitely pick them up if you find them on Amazon. They're classics. His whole thing is there's only 3 things that matter in the life insurance business if you want success. See the people, see the people, see the people.
Nice. 3 things. See the
Yep.
people.
That's what it's about, man. Don't ever lose sight of what matters in this business. There's a lot of things that can distract us, but if you're not talking to prospects, you're not trying to help solve their problems with whatever insurance product that you use to solve their problems, you're not progressing, you're not growing, you're dying, and you're failing.
For
So
sure.
never lose sight of that.
Yeah. That's funny. That's been like a recurring kind of theme popping up in my life right now. It's like, if you're not growing, you're dying. And I've always kind of known that, but I think that has a big tie to life in general. Like, happiness comes with growth, and just the satisfaction of continuing to build. So yeah, it's awesome to see you your successes, and you sharing all these great little snippets. I think this will be great for a lot of people. So yeah, David, where can people find you if they want to find you, like on social media and stuff?
Real easy. Go to YouTube and put in David Duford. You'll find an endless array of videos that will take a lifetime to watch. You can also go to davidduford.com if you'd like to learn more about how my agency works. If you're curious about maybe joining, you'll see more information about that there.
Awesome. Sounds good, David. Well, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. I think that was some really valuable stuff, especially for people thinking about doing life insurance along with PNC and whatnot. So
yeah,
really, really appreciate it. And if anybody out there is looking for an opportunity, sounds like he's got some dialed in processes, and you guys are on the way up. So good stuff. Thank you, David. I appreciate
Chris,
it.
thank you. Appreciate it, man.
Of course. Thanks so much. See ya.